Hello, everyone, and welcome into the Star Wars Legends Lounge, the show that celebrates the books from Star Wars Legends. I'm Aaron Moats. On today's show, we check back in with our favorite X-Wing pilots. Following the death of Grand Admiral Thrawn, Corran Horn returns to his mission to find the people he was imprisoned with on the Lusankya. Wedge Antilles leads Corran and the rest of Rogue Squadron on a mission against a ruthless Imperial warlord. But when the mission goes sideways, the rogues are bailed out by a ghost from the past. And there's not just one of her. There's two. It's X-Wing Isard's Revenge by Michael A. Stackpole, and I'll talk about the book in just a few minutes. But first, we're just over a week into the Major League Baseball season, and thus begins my 6-month addiction to watching the Baltimore Orioles and guzzling Pepto-Bismol. It's difficult to judge a team after its first 6 games, so I won't make any prediction about how the O's will fare the rest of the season. However, I don't think the team will be in the same spot they were last year after the month of April. That was a disaster. What I will say is that when everyone is healthy, I think the lineup and the starting pitching staff have more talent this year than it did in 2025. I have some concerns about the bullpen, but I think it has the chance to be better than last year. And I have a lot more confidence in Ryan Helsley as the closer than I did with Craig Kimbrell going into last season. Fingers crossed the O's play up to their potential, and the team is playing in October again. Also, we've gotten to the business ends of the men's and women's NCAA tournaments. Both of my brackets were shredded by the Sweet 16, especially in the men's tournament. I'm looking at you, Wisconsin and Gonzaga. I picked more chalk in the women's tournament, but I'm still only in the middle of my pool, so still, we've had a lot of fun games. Most of them have been played at a high level. Congratulations to all 8 teams for making their respective Final Fours. Now, since there's no WVU in either tournament, I'm just hoping the games in this year's Final Fours are played at a really high level, and they are as exciting as a lot of the games were in the earlier rounds of the 2 tournaments. But listener, you don't want to hear me talk about this stuff any longer. I can hear you yelling, "Get to the Star Wars, Aaron!" Okay. How about we start with a listener question? Today's email comes from Ugo. Ugo says, "Hello, Aaron. When you covered the Coruscant Nights trilogy and The Last Jedi, we saw that there were a lot of Inquisitors. I guess that when the Empire found a Force-sensitive individual, they were either recruited or eliminated. In some cases, could they have been former Jedi who joined to avoid being killed? Anyway, after these books, we don't really see them anymore, except Jarek in the Dark Forces series. Do you think there might have been a purge within the Inquisitors themselves, like the Night of the Long Knives, when the leaders of the SA were eliminated? After that point, we mainly see the Emperor's hands, like Mara Jade, and I guess characters like Jarek and Lumaya would also fall into that category. One thing that has never worked for me is the number of Jedi who survived Order 66. For me, it goes against the idea presented in the original trilogy that there were essentially no Jedi left, and that if any had survived, we might have seen them fight back against the Empire." Well, thank you very much for your email, Ugo. I would say yes to your first question, and it's possible to your second. We don't see a lot of Inquisitors in Legends. The first mention of them that I know of is in the Star Wars source book from the late 80s for the Star Wars role-playing game by West End Games. and they would be expanded upon in additional source books that were published. But besides the role-playing game, we really only get much of the Inquisitors in the Coruscant Knights novels, the Last of the Jedi young reader books, the Evasive Action webcomics, and the Dark Forces novellas. And yes, many of the Inquisitors were former Jedi seduced to the dark side who joined the Empire, like Jarek, Ferris Olin, and Amisa Darius. And they would hunt down surviving Jedi or Force-sensitive individuals and either kill them or recruit them into their ranks. Now, as far as I know of, there was no type of purge within the Inquisitorius similar to the Knight of the Long Knives, but there definitely could have been. In Legends, we don't really know why their numbers dropped as much and as quickly as it did in the time leading up to the events of the original trilogy. If I'm wrong about this, I invite anyone out there to correct me. As to your last point, Ugo, for the longest time, I also had an issue with the number of Jedi who survived the Purge. This is more of a canon issue in my opinion, although it does pertain to Legends as well. I grew up thinking the only Jedi who survived the Purge were Obi-Wan and Yoda, and they were protecting the only other Force-sensitive people who survived, Anakin's children, Luke and Leia. To me, not only did that make sense by the way the story was told in the original trilogy, but I thought it was more dramatic because it was just these 4 Force users against Emperor Palpatine, Darth Vader, and the might of the Empire. My opinion has softened over the last 15 to 20 years. First, because new people are going to be born all the time who are Force sensitive. It just doesn't make any sense that during the 2 decades that the Empire ruled the galaxy, that the Force would just kind of go dormant in selecting new people to experience it. So that part was easy for me to reconcile. But I was much slower to soften my opinion about the number of Jedi who survived the Purge. However, I always say that George Lucas created this universe so he gets to make the rules. And he has said on numerous times that if only 1% of the 10,000 Jedi Knights in the Order at the formation of the Empire survived the Purge, then that leaves 100 Jedi still out there. Logically and mathematically, that does make some sense. And if it works for George, then it works for me. The one remaining sticking point for me, and it sounds like it is for you too, Ugo, is that if there were about 100 Jedi running around the galaxy during the Imperial reign, why haven't we seen more than just 5 to 10 of them fighting back against the Empire, or coming out from wherever they were hiding after the Empire falls? Hopefully, we either get some answer to this question, or we do see more Jedi working in secret in future projects, maybe on something like The Hidden Path. Thanks again for the email, Ugo. Listener, if you'd like to ask a question, you can send me an email at swlegendslounge@gmail.com or send me a message on Blue Sky, Instagram, or Twitter at SW Legends Lounge. And if you'd like to get your voice on the show, you can record a short message and email it in. But please, remember, record it in MP3 audio format. Now it's time for today's book, X-Wing Isard's Revenge by Michael A. Stackpole. Listener, grab yourself a drink. Let's head in to the Star Wars Legends Lounge. The story begins after the Battle of Bilbringi. Grand Admiral Thrawn is dead, and the remaining members of the Imperial Remnant are spread throughout the galaxy. Now, the New Republic turns its attention to fighting this admiral or that general or that warlord, and it begins by setting its sights on liberating the Sutric hegemony from Prince Admiral Delek Krenel. While the New Republic military plans its invasion, Krenel scrambles to plan his defense, and the Prince Admiral is about to receive some help from the former head of Imperial Intelligence, Isard. Krenel is initially skeptical when Isard shows up in his office. The entire galaxy has thought she's been dead since Thyphera 2 years ago. However, Isard says she faked her death and laid low during Thrawn's campaign, waiting to see how the war played out. Now that the New Republic has been softened up a little, Isard says she's ready to get back into the fight. She offers to help Krenel plan his defense of the Sutric hegemony. Her price? The destruction of Rogue Squadron. Krenel and Isard believe the strength of the New Republic is also its biggest weakness, the diversity of its citizens. The two hatch a scheme where they open the Sutric hegemony to all humans who want to move there. Krenel even announces that the hegemony is willing to give a large area of land on a suitable planet to the survivors of Alderaan. Meanwhile, at a dinner party on Coruscant, Corran is approached by a man who seems disoriented. Still, there's something familiar about the man. Finally, Corran recognizes him. They were prisoners together on the Lusankya. Ulor Set? Corran asks. Yes, that's my name, the man says. I remember. Set smiles at Corran and then collapses, dead. An autopsy reveals Set had an implant in his brain designed to release a lethal toxin when someone said his name. Wedge says whoever did that was devious and wanted to send a message. Corran says they know only one person who would use one of the Lusankya prisoners against them, Isane Isard. Corran and the rogues begin investigating Set and retrace the movements that brought the man to Coruscant. Along the way, they find and free another small group of Lusankya prisoners on the planet Commenor. And when the prisoners tell the rogues that they were moved there by Isane Isard, Corran and Wedge say that's impossible. Isard is dead. But the prisoners are adamant. It was Isard. And she visited them only a few weeks ago. The search for the remaining Lusankya prisoners take the rogues to Distna, a hollow moon orbiting Corvus Minor. New Republic intelligence also finds information that Krenel is building a new superweapon at Distna, something called the Pulsar Station, that intelligence thinks could be similar to the Death Star. So, Rogue Squadron has two objectives when it arrives at Corvus Minor: gather intelligence about the Pulsar Station and find the remaining Lusankya prisoners. However, Distna is a trap. The rogues don't find any evidence of a superweapon at Distna. What they do find are 6 squadrons of TIE fighters waiting for them. The rogues find themselves caught between Corvus Minor and the TIEs. With nowhere to go, Wedge orders the rogues to break by flights and fight their way through the TIEs however they can. The rogues cut their way through the fighters, shooting down 3 or 4 each. But there's just too many, and the TIEs soon overwhelm the rogues. Corran is hit. His X-Wing loses power. He watches helpless as 4 more of the rogues are hit. Wes Jansen, Asir Sylar, and the two rookies, Kijin Slee and Lear Zatok. It looks like curtains for the rogues when suddenly two squadrons of TIE defenders appear out of nowhere and attack the Imperials. The defenders destroy the TIE fighters and use tractor beams to grab the rogues and jump to hyperspace. Aayla Wasiri analyzes the evidence Rogue Squadron found on Commenor, and the intelligence officer finds something odd. The evidence is just too good. It's like someone wanted Rogue Squadron to head to Disna. Aayla tells Mirax and Booster Tarek about what she's discovered, and the retired smuggler takes them to Corvus Minor in his Star Destroyer, the Errant Venture. Now, the Venture arrives after the battle. Aayla, Mirax, and Booster search the debris for survivors. They bring back the bodies of the 4 Rogue Squadron pilots that were shot down. Amazingly, Wes Jansen and Asir Sylar are still alive. Jansen is submerged in a Bacta tank, but Asir's injuries are less serious. When Aayla and Mirax visit her in the Venture's medbay, Asir tells the women not to tell anyone that she's survived. Listme is killed in action, Asir says. Aayla and Mirax are confused, but they respect the Mothan's wishes and list her KIA alongside Lear Zatok and Kijin Slee. The New Republic's liberation of the Sutric hegemony begins on Leonid III, right where Krenel and Isard want them to hit. They leave the planet relatively undefended, allowing the New Republic to quickly take it. In the aftermath, Krennic announces to the galaxy that it was Leonid III where he was going to offer a continent to the Alderaanian survivors. Now he can't, because the New Republic has invaded the Sutric hegemony and is forcing their style of government on anyone who lives there. It's a political win for Krenel, who has now put the New Republic government in a tough spot. Either continue deeper into the hegemony and take the capital on Sutric 4, or withdraw. The TIE Defenders tow Rogue Squadron to a hidden base. Wedge is escorted to the office of the base commander to talk to the person who rescued the squadron. It's the former head of Imperial Intelligence, Esain Isard. Isard tells Wedge that she's willing to help the New Republic take down Krenel. If that's so, Wedge asks, then why are you helping Krenel right now? That's not me, Isard says. That's my clone. Isard tells Wedge that she used her clone at Thyfera to create a diversion. That's who Corran killed. At least that's what Isard thought. Apparently, the clone also survived. Isard says that she'll give the New Republic information that will help them beat Krenel if they stop her clone and offer her, Esain Isard, immunity for all of her crimes. Isard's plan includes teaching the rogues how to fly the TIE Defenders to offer their services to Prince Admiral Krenel. It'll take a few weeks, so the rogues will have to remain dead during that time. However, while the rogues are in training, Corran sends his astromech Whistler and Wedge's droid Gate on a secret mission to find Mirax and let her know what's happening. It takes a few days, but the droids do make their way to the Errant Venture. Whistler delivers Corran's message that Corran and most of the rogues are still alive, that Esain Isard is still alive, and that her clone is the person helping Krenel. Corran says the rogues are going ahead with Isard's plan to infiltrate Krenel's military, but he and Wedge don't trust her. They know she's going to betray them somehow at some point. It's up to her, Aayla, and Booster to figure out what Isard is up to. Wedge adopts the persona of Imperial Colonel Antar Roat and offers Requiem Squadron to Krenel. The Prince Admiral accepts, allowing the rogues to gather intelligence on Krenel's organization. They secretly contact Admiral Akbar and send him information about Krenel's plan to wait until New Republic forces move deeper into the Sutric hegemony and then attack Coruscant when it's relatively undefended. The intelligence allows Akbar to ambush Krenel's forces at its staging area. Akbar employs a two-pronged pincer movement that he learned from the recent battles against Grand Admiral Thrawn. The tactics overwhelm Krenel's forces, destroying them and killing the Prince Admiral. Back on Sutric 4, the rogues ditch their Imperial personas and split up. Corran, Oral Kurg, and Naren Vakil head to Sutric's prison complex in hopes that Isard's clone had moved the Lusankia prisoners there. They fight through the prison defenses to the upper cell block. There, finally, nearly 5 years after promising to return for them, Corran finds General Jan Dodonna and frees the remaining Lusankia prisoners. Wedge and the remaining rogues take to the skies in their TIE Defenders and set their sights on Isard's clone. The clone tries to escape in an Imperial shuttle, fleeing Sutric 4. The rogues give chase, but Wedge feels a strange sense of déjà vu. Something about the clone's actions are very familiar. Wedge orders the rogues to follow the shuttle while he doubles back to the capital. When Mendonos and Gavin Darklighter shoot down the shuttle, Wedge traces a comm signal to the military training center back in Sutric 4's capital. He calms the clone, telling her that he figured that a feint was happening because it was the same tactic Ysane Isard used to escape Thyfera. Because she is Isard's clone. Wedge fires 2 missiles into the training center. It explodes, killing the clone. Meanwhile, way across the galaxy, Ysane Isard arrives at the Bilbringi shipyards, to where Lusankia is undergoing repairs. Everything that's happened, from Isard's clone helping Krenel's campaign against the New Republic, to Isard helping Rogue Squadron take them down, has been a misdirection to give Isard the opportunity to steal back the Superstar Destroyer and return the symbol of power to her. Isard's forces head to the bridge while she heads to her former command suite. When Isard takes back her chair, the door opens, and in steps Aayla Wasiri, holding a blaster. The 2 women exchange barbs when Isard pulls her own blaster and fires. Her bolt hits Aayla in the shoulder, but Aayla's shot hits Isard in the gut. The story ends as Isard dies. Her troops are captured, and the New Republic will never need to fear the former head of Imperial intelligence again. Time to take a break. When I return, I'll talk more about X-Wing, Isard's Revenge. I'm Aaron Moats. You're listening to the Star Wars Legends Lounge. Thank you for listening to the Star Wars Legends Lounge, where we celebrate the books from Star Wars Legends. But allow me to recommend a book from Star Wars canon. Cataclysm continues the story of Phase 2 of the High Republic. The fighting continues between the worlds of Iram and Arano. The Jedi think the situation is being manipulated by a mysterious group called the Path of the Open Hand. The Path claims the Force should be free to guide all peaceful people in the galaxy, but Jedi Knight Gela Natai believes the group's leader has a much more sinister plan to grab power for herself. Will Gela unravel the mystery before the path turns the galaxy against the Jedi Order? Find out in Cataclysm by Lydia Kang. Welcome back to the Star Wars Legends Lounge, the show that celebrates the books from Star Wars Legends. Today, I'm talking about X-Wing, Isard's Revenge by Michael A. Stackpole. Book number 8 in the Legends X-Wing series. Well, you know from the first 7 books in the X-Wing series that I really like these stories, and it's no different here. I like this story. I am still more partial to sort of the long form storytelling that a series of books have over just a single book that's, I don't know if you call it a standalone. It's kind of a standalone story. The book contains all of the best parts of Stackpole's X-Wing books. There is very descriptive, easy to understand space battles. The story moves quickly. There's a bit of mystery and misdirection, especially when it comes to the different plans that either Hsien Isard has or that her clone has. I thought one of the more interesting parts of the story was that the clone apparently doesn't realize it's a clone. The clone really believes that it's Hsien Isard, and it's not until the very end when Wedge and the other rogues take her out that the clone finally realizes that she is not the original Hsien Isard. I'm not the biggest fan of the storyline where the rogues and Isard sort of team up together, but I'm not the biggest fan of that type of storytelling in general. I have no issue with stories where two sides that are not allies, two sides that are kind of antagonistic, team up together to face a shared threat. But when it involves two outright adversarial groups or two outright adversarial characters, those are not my favorite. Except, of course, the science fiction movie from the mid-'80s, Enemy Mine, starring Dennis Quaid and Louis Gossett Jr. That is an excellent film. I've always liked that movie. But we're not here to talk about Enemy Mine. We're talking about Star Wars Legends. I have no issue with Stackpole bringing Isard back after the end of the Bacta War, where it appears that Corran kills Isard as she is trying to escape Thyfera. It's Star Wars. If you don't see a body, then that character is available to come back. Heck, occasionally when you do see a body, that character will still come back. So I have no issue with that. I think the story may have worked even more for me if we spent some more time with Prince Admiral Krenel and built him up a little more as the antagonist in the story, right alongside Isard. I believe Krenel does feature in a number of Legends comics leading up to this book. I have never read them, so maybe if I had, Krenel would be more of a well-rounded, more formidable antagonist. But just from reading this story, I never felt like he was really much of a threat for the Rogues or for the New Republic as a whole. I did like the plan that Isard's clone develops to try to divide the New Republic from within. After the war against Grand Admiral Thrawn, and even before that, with the Kratos virus that Isard unleashed on Coruscant and the rest of the galaxy, even though the New Republic has this grand multi-species coalition, some cracks have formed. Coming out of the Imperial era, it's understandable that many of the aliens in the galaxy are skeptical, are cynical of the majority human population. Isard and Krenel take advantage of this by playing on some of those tensions, some of those prejudices that exist between the humans of the galaxy and the other alien species of the galaxy. Krenel says, look, we don't want to fight the New Republic anymore. I just want to remain in control of the Sutric hegemony here. The planets within the hegemony have said, we prefer the way we live. We want to govern ourselves. We do not want to petition to join the New Republic. Just leave us alone. The New Republic claims that the citizens of the galaxy have a right to govern themselves. Those of us in the Sutric hegemony have decided we want to govern ourselves by not becoming members of the New Republic. And Isard's clone and Krenel come up with the plan to open up the hegemony to any humans who wish to move there, especially those who have an issue with the multi-species coalition in the New Republic government. In addition, to pull on the heartstrings of some of those human populations within the New Republic, Krenel announces that the hegemony is going to try to find a planet within its borders that would be a suitable gift for any survivors of Alderaan's destruction to colonize there, as sort of an apology for the Death Star destroying the planet. But the key to this plan, and what makes the plan pretty devious, is that the clone tells Krenel not to announce yet which planet he has decided within the hegemony he will offer land to the Alderaanian survivors, the Alderaanian colonists, until they bait the New Republic to invade the border of the hegemony. And they do. They allow a planet, Leonid 3, to remain relatively undefended. Krenel pulls his forces back from that planet toward the center of the hegemony. It allows the New Republic to take the planet relatively easily. There is some fighting, but Krenel is willing to sacrifice this skeletal defense force to the New Republic. And when the New Republic wipes out the small force that Krenel leaves on the planet, he can then say, wait a minute, that was the place that I was willing to offer the Alderaanians. The New Republic is not respecting its own stated mission about people being able to rule themselves. It is the same as the empire it overthrew a few years ago. I think that's my favorite part of the story, is how Isard's clone and Krenel manipulate this situation to make the New Republic look as this evil, new empire. Just a multicultural, multi-species empire. It's not true, of course, and by the end of the book, everyone in the story realizes it's not true, that Krenel is this power-hungry warlord whose sights are set to reclaim Imperial Center on Coruscant. But in the moment, I thought this was an effective plan, a sinister plan, a devious plan, but a very clever plan that Isard's clone and Krenel came up with. I also really liked the revelation of what the real Ysane Isard was up to, that all of the actions in the story, everything that she was manipulating between her clone, the Sutric hegemony, Krenel, the rogues, and the New Republic as a whole, all of that was aimed so that she would be able to steal back the symbol of her power, the Superstar Destroyer Lusankia, to escape with it from where it was almost finished being repaired at the Bilbringi shipyards, to where she could escape to some corner of the galaxy, in the Outer Rim, in wild space, in the unknown regions, maybe even in the galactic core, and where she would be able to start building up a new power base from which to attack the New Republic and try to bring some form of the Empire back into power. I remember I was confused when I first read this story years ago, but even at the end of reading it that first time, looking back at everything in the book, each of the different main plot points in the book could be viewed in a certain way where it really made sense how this fit into this 4D version of chess that Isard was playing. That being said, there was one small aspect of that that did not work for me. And that was Whistler and Gate, Corrin's astromech and Wedge's astromech, escaping from Isard's secret compound and making their way across the galaxy to relay the information that they had to Mirax and Ayala and Booster Tarek. The droids are fun. I always like the droids, especially the ones that help fly these fighters, the astromechs. I may not be as big of a fan of droids overall as most Star Wars fans, but I like them. They're fun. What doesn't work for me in this story is that Hussein Isard has thought of everything. But after she has these restraining bolts installed on the droids, keeping them in storage, sort of mechanical hostages, while the rogues are learning how to fly the TIE Defenders, the one thing she doesn't consider is that somehow the droids could get out. And I'm not saying maybe she thinks that the droids themselves can break free of the restraining bolts, which is what happens. Apparently back when Corran still worked for the Corellian security forces, he had uploaded some sort of program into Whistler that when he would put Whistler into some sort of power down state, there was a hidden program in there that allowed Whistler to wake back up after a certain amount of time, whether or not a restraining bolt was secured upon him, and break the bolt off. I'm not saying Hussein Isard needed to know that. What does seem odd is that the droids are gone for an entire week, and Isard and her forces never figure this out. Not once during that week is there a security patrol inside her base that opens up the room to where the droids are hidden. That not once during that week there's nobody sitting at a security bench that looks at the cameras in the different rooms across the base and sees that in this one storage room, there are 2 astromechs missing. That's the only thing in this story that really doesn't work for me. But the rest of it is a pretty fun adventure. I really liked how Aayla and Mirax and Booster figure out what the real Hussein Isard's plan is. Booster, of course, the former smuggler, former criminal, spent years locked up in Kessel. Of course, owns his own Star Destroyer, much to the dismay of many in the New Republic government, is tasked with trying to think like Isard. Because let's face it, of the 3, he's the most devious one. And it is Booster who comes up with the idea that maybe the one thing Isard wants is to not only come back into power, but to really stick it to the people that took everything away from her. Who would those people be? Well, that would be Rogue Squadron. And what was it they took away from her? Not just her power, not just her influence, but they literally took away the Super Star Destroyer that she was in charge of. That Super Star Destroyer still exists. The New Republic is trying to repair it and retrofit it in the Bilbringi shipyards. And it's Booster that comes up with this. Aayla and Mirax figure out that everything has been a misdirection. That if what Booster is saying is true, then that means that when the New Republic and the Rogues are looking the other way, that Isard is going to make her play for Lusankia. They get there first. They're able to use Booster's small forces to neutralize the invasion party that Isard sends into the Super Star Destroyer. And Aela stops Isard herself in Isard's former command suite. Again, it's a fun part of the book. It's a fun mystery to figure out. I mean, as a reader, you know that what Isain Isard is saying to the rogues cannot be trusted. But what is her ultimate goal? And it turns out her goal is getting the Lusankya back. Now, the one thing I really didn't mention here in this discussion is Corran's search for Jan Dudana and the other prisoners from the Lusankya that he was incarcerated with 4 or 5 years ago. It's a satisfying conclusion to that story. I just didn't find that plot line quite as interesting as some of the new things that we got in this book. Well, it's time to wrap up. Listener, if you'd like to contact the show, you can send me an email at swlegendslounge@gmail.com or send me a message on Blue Sky, Instagram, or Twitter at swlegendslounge. Send me your questions, your comments. If you disagree with something I've said on the show, let me know. I'll read your opinion here on the show. And please send me your favorite Star Wars character groupings. I love reading all those messages. And again, I haven't gotten one yet this year in 2026. Coming up on the next episode, I continue with Corran's story as he finally decides to explore his Force-sensitive heritage by studying at Luke Skywalker's brand new academy. It's I, Jedi by Michael A. Stackpole. You can look forward to that episode coming out on April 17th. Thank you so much for listening to the Star Wars Legends Lounge. I'm Aaron Moats. May the Force be with you. And remember, there's always a bit of truth in legends.